Hey everyone, it's Angela Allen from the Handmade Homestead. Welcome back to day number 12 of the Every Bit Counts challenge for the month of August. And today we're doing tomato jam. Tomato jam might sound unusual to some of you, but it's really just kind of upscale ketchup and sun-dried tomatoes kind of all together in one. You can use it in anything that you would use jam in, sweet or savory. It does have a lot of cloves and stuff in it. You could use it as ketchup. It might be a little too flavorful for that, but see what you think with your recipe. There are recipes, plenty of recipes online for it. You can make it spicy with extra crushed red pepper. You can make it sweet and savory. You can make it not as sweet and not as savory. It's totally up to you, totally up to your family's preferences. I like something that's very versatile that I can use with meat or on pizza or with crackers and on bruschetta. That's really good too. So I'm gonna get going. I've got a lot of tomatoes to process, but first let's get them washed. All right, let's get going with tomato jam. Now this is going to be a sweet, savory, kind of spicy tomato jam. You'll be able to customize the heat. We are going to use a specific recipe, so you will be measuring stuff. You can be kind of loosely measuring most things, but the acid, which will be either lemon or lime juice, and the salt and the sugar, you'll want to do those exact just to make it safe. This is going to be water bath processed as well. You can make like half of the recipe maybe, or a quarter of the recipe, stash it in your fridge and eat it that way, but I am gonna water bath can this, and I'm gonna do a recipe and a half. So instead of 5 pounds of tomatoes, this recipe is gonna call for 7.5 pounds of tomatoes, because frankly, I have a lot of tomatoes I need to work with. So that's what I'm gonna do, but you could definitely tweak it a little bit to suit yourself. And again, I will post the entire recipe at the end of the video. First, I'm gonna wash those tomatoes and then I'm gonna slice them up. So my tomatoes are all chopped. Cut off the ends, chop them up in chunks, the size that I prefer, and I'm ready to go. Now, into this goes all of the seasonings. We're gonna cook everything together. Since this is more than will fit in my pan initially, I'm gonna mix all the seasonings in it now and then start cooking it down, about half of it. When that kind of cooks down a little bit, I'll put the other half in, and I'll keep doing that until it's all cooked in. So this is what I'm putting in here. Now you'll have to refer to the recipe because again, I am doing 1.5 times the recipe. So white sugar. I have a little bit of molasses in there. You can use brown sugar if you prefer. That's the rest of my sugar. In my case, I'm putting 10 tablespoons of lemon juice in. The regular recipe calls for 4, I believe, but you'll have to look that up. This is salt, cinnamon, red pepper flakes going in. Now, as far as cloves go, I only had whole cloves, so I put them right in my mortar and pestle, and I think it was maybe 6 cloves came to my 1/4 teaspoon amount that I needed. So that's gone in too. The only thing left to have is about 2 teaspoons of ginger. I'm gonna grate it with a box grater. You can use a microplane if you want, but I wanted to show you how I store my ginger. When I use ginger, I don't usually bother peeling it. When I get the rhizome home or I dig it up, sometimes I do grow it myself, I leave that peeling on, wash it really well, dry it really well, throw it in a bag and put it right in my freezer. So when I want to use it, I just grate it right off of the piece that's been in my freezer. I don't know if you can see, but it grades really, really well. You can do any size that you want. You can see it grades really, really well. So I'm going to finish grating that to get enough in there. As far as the ginger goes, it never spoils when I keep it in the freezer, obviously. When it's harder, it does grate off faster and really efficiently. And like I said, I never worry about the peeling if I'm grating it. So yeah, I'm gonna grate that, get that mixed together, and I'll see you over at the stove to put it in the pan. All right, let's get this tomato jam on the stove and start cooking it down. All right, well, I'm getting this hot, and we're gonna bring this up to boiling, and then we're gonna turn it down. And this isn't all of it. Again, I have a little bit more to put in, but we're gonna get this cooking first. Cook it down a little bit so the rest will fit in there. You do want to watch this once it starts cooking and gets thicker, because it will burn all that sugar in it. This is almost an hour into the cooking process. It's still quite thin. It still has a long way to go. So this is a couple of hours in. I did use a stick blender to pulverize some of the tomato skins. It's still a little bit chunky, but it's definitely smoother than it was. It does help thicken it, but it's still got another probably hour to go to be thick enough to jar. I know it's taken about 3 hours for me to cook this down enough, but keep in mind I did have a batch and a half to go, and I did cook it really slow because frankly I was busy in the kitchen with other tasks and I didn't want it to burn. So I've got my canning pot on, I've got my lids in, my bottles are already sterilized in there. Just gonna keep stirring this and cooking it down while that water heats up. That's gonna take a little bit of time. I want to show you how thick this is, just so you can get an idea. It's not thick like strawberry jam in a jar. It's going to be more like a sauce. So keep in mind it is still hot, but it should be about the thickness of ketchup. And see how I can put it on the back of the spoon, and it does kind of sit there. It doesn't just run off. And keep in mind that's still very hot. So when that cools, it will be thicker. So this looks good to me and ready to put it into the canning jars and water bath process it. So I'm going to get things ready to water bath process it. That measuring cup just has some vinegar in it. There's a rag just to dip in the vinegar to clean the rims off. That's my magnet for pulling out my jar lids. A funnel, of course, a jar lifter, a tong set, and that's just to get the wet jars, the hot jars, out of the water bath canner to fill them. And I'm going to put a towel down just for safety so that the hot jars don't go onto the cold countertop. And then I'm going to grab a chopstick, and I use that just to debubble. Works really well. This is something that's really helpful for canners to know. So many people have to break out the measuring tape when they're filling a jar. It'll say 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1/4 inch headspace. All right, but it's already on the jar if you know how to read the threads. So go to where the threads overlap. You can see one starts there and finishes there. Let me get this in the focus. All right, there we go. So one starts and finishes right here, right? And then there's a line right here below the first thread on the neck. That line, if you line up a tape measure there, that is a 1 inch mark. So from here to the top of the bottle is 1 inch. So this second one up, that is your 1/2 inch line. If you fill your contents to the underside of this thread, the thread in the middle, you're at a 1/2 inch. Can you see that? I'm hoping that will clear up a little bit. So maybe if I go further away, I can zoom it in on edit. So that means this top line, the underside of it is a 1/4 inch. And then the middle one, the underside of it is a 1/2 inch. And all the way down here past this last thread, which is like the neck of the bottle, there's another line. That gives you your 1 inch line. So if it says 1/2 inch headspace, I know to go under this line right here. Not the first line, the second line. But you have to measure it from where the lines intersect. This line ends here and it ends there. They overlap right there because as the bottle goes around, these lines slightly move and your headspace part becomes different. On the other side of the bottle, the measurements aren't the same. So you have to go where the where the lines start and stop, and you can use that as your guideline for your 1-inch headspace, for your 1/2-inch headspace, and for your 1/4-inch headspace. It works every time on all of these mason jar bottles. If they take a standard side mason jar lid or a standard lid, it doesn't matter if it's a wide mouth or if it's a regular mouth jar, it still works that way. Measure it for yourself if you don't believe me, but that's a whole lot easier than bringing out a measuring tool for every jar you fill. So canning is really just the same steps over and over again. These are jars that have been sterilized. I actually sterilized them earlier today. I'm just heating them up again now. And you can see they're nice and hot. You take your jar. Use a funnel. You want to keep the jar edges clean if you can. You're going to fill your jar. In this case, I'm doing about a 1/2 inch of headspace. Filling it just where I could see it at the end of the funnel. I'm going to take out that funnel. Cloth with the vinegar, and this is just to debubble it. We'll make sure there's no air bubbles trapped. Not really a problem with liquids usually, but this is a really thick liquid. I'm going to make sure there's no residue on the lip, because something sticky or something oily can be a real problem if you're trying to get the jar to seal. These have already been cleaned and they're warm. Fingertip tight, just means tight and then a little some, not much, and then into the hot water it goes. And then it's just repeat until you're done. Jar, hot water, funnel, tomato jam, just until it comes up to the bottom of the funnel. There's the funnel, debubble. Make sure our headspace is right. Return this like I showed you to the threads. You can see there's the middle thread, top thread, and bottom. So there's the middle thread, it's just to the bottom of it. That's a 1/2 inch. Vinegar on my cloth. Make sure the rim and the edge is clean. On goes the lid. On goes the removable band. And then just slightly more on and just a little bit of your fingertip pressure. And I'm going to keep doing that with all of them until I get all of them in the pan. Now we're going to bring that up to a full rolling boil, and once it gets there and it's boiling hard, we'll put the lid on. We will let it process, water bath process. FYI, this is a full rolling boil, and you don't start timing till you get this kind of boil. So we let those process for 15 minutes, turned the heat off, took the cover off the pan and let them sit for another 5 before taking them out. And we got 10 half pints of tomato jam. And the remnants that were still in the pan, once the pan cooled off, they were very thick and very spreadable, just like any jam that you'd put on bread. Well, I was able to use altogether about 8 pounds of tomatoes. Some of that weight was lost in cutting off the tops and cutting out some of the cores. And I was able to package up 2 bags of tomatoes for the freezer. One had about 6 or 7 pounds in it. The other bag had about 5. So that's another thing I was able to process today. You can hear some of those seals popping as they get cool on the counter. And I want to tell you that out of 10 jars, 10 of them sealed perfectly. And as you can see, my counter is usually covered in tomatoes this time of year, and I am just down to that many left until I pick them again tomorrow. Well, that wraps up day 12 for the Every Bit Counts challenge. I'll give you one more look at how beautiful that tomato jam turned out. We can't wait to try it. and I will be back tomorrow for the next video in the installment of the 31 days. Check out the other vids. Bye. The Handmade Homestead can be found on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, and we look forward to seeing you there. Remember to like and subscribe. It helps so much, and we appreciate your time.